The abandoned dragon. The planet was barren. Dust swirled in the empty air as the sun hung high in the sky, casting an orange glow over the desolate landscape. No signs of life were visible, just rocks, dirt, and the occasional dead tree. It was a place where survival was impossible for most living creatures. Yet in this forgotten corner of the galaxy there lay a creature unlike any other, an albino baby dragon. Its scales, usually shining bright in the sunlight, were now dull and covered in a thick layer of barnacles. The small creature struggled to move, its wings twitching weakly in an attempt to lift itself off the ground. The barnacles clung to its fragile body like a deadly disease, a result of being abandoned here by the galactic aliens who had once cared for it. It had been left behind. There were no cries of distress, no one to help, just the soft, rasping breaths of the baby dragon, trying to survive in an environment it wasn't made for. Its large, pale eyes blinked slowly, scanning the horizon for any sign of help, any sign of a way out of the bleak place it now called home. But there was nothing. The dragon was alone. With each slow breath, it grew weaker. The barnacles had latched onto the dragon's wings, making it almost impossible to fly. The young creature's tail swayed, but not with the power it once had. The creatures that had left it behind, those cold, uncaring galactic aliens, had done their job. They had used the dragon for whatever purpose they needed, and now, when it was no longer useful to them, they had discarded it without a second thought. The baby dragon's tiny claws scraped the dirt as it pushed itself forward, trying to find shelter under a nearby rock. The sunlight burned against its sensitive skin, but the shadow of the rock promised some sort of relief. Its stomach growled softly, but there was no food, no water, just the endless wasteland that stretched out before it. The dragon's scales were smooth and sleek, but the barnacles had already begun to take a toll. They dug into its flesh, causing pain with every movement. The creature's breath came in shallow bursts, trying to fight off the weight of exhaustion. It wanted to cry out, but its voice was weak, barely audible above the howling winds. A distant sound interrupted the silence. A ship's engine hummed faintly, cutting through the air. The baby dragon's ears perked up. It turned its head, hoping, praying that someone, anyone, was coming to rescue it. But as the ship drew closer, the dragon's heart sank. The ship wasn't coming to help. It was just passing by. Another ship flying through the vast emptiness of space, unaware of the desperate creature lying in wait. The dragon's hope faded, and it lay down, too exhausted to keep trying. It curled into a ball, the once majestic wings folding against its body, the barnacles scraping against the ground. It was so tired, so very tired. It had been alone for what felt like forever, abandoned by the very beings that had once cared for it. And yet there was still something deep within its chest, a flicker of life. It was small, fragile, but it was there. It refused to give up. The dragon's mind wandered back to the days when it had been surrounded by those who cared for it, the galactic aliens who had fed it, trained it, and protected it. But those days were long gone. The memories felt distant now, like a dream that had faded upon waking. A cold wind blew across the desert-like landscape, stirring the dirt around the dragon's body. Its eyes fluttered shut as it struggled to stay awake. It had one last hope, a small, quiet thought that refused to let go. What if someone came for it? What if someone came to save it from this nightmare? The dragon let out a soft sigh, too weak to hold on to the thought any longer. Its body ached, the barnacles pressing deeper into its skin. It closed its eyes and drifted into an uneasy sleep, hoping that, somehow, a miracle would come. Little did it know, across the galaxy, someone was about to receive a call that would change everything for this abandoned baby dragon. A human on a dangerous mission. Far from the barren planet, in a cramped, dimly lit workshop aboard an aging starship, a human mechanic worked tirelessly. His name was Eli, and he had always preferred machines to people. Surrounded by the hum of tools and the smell of grease, He was deep in concentration, fixing the ship's faulty engines. The space around him was a mess, wires and scraps of metal strewn across the floor. But to him, it was the perfect environment. It was his world. The ship itself had seen better days. Paint chipped away from the hull, and rust clung to the metal like stubborn memories. Yet Eli had kept it running longer than anyone else thought possible. He could fix anything. If it could be fixed, he was the one to do it. But this particular ship had been his home for years, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. He needed a new challenge, a new purpose. It was during one of these quiet moments of reflection when the alert pinged, a distress signal. At first, Eli ignored it. He had grown accustomed to such random signals, most of them a result of malfunctioning systems or shipwrecks in the distant parts of space. But something about this one caught his attention. It was different. The coordinates indicated a remote, uncharted planet on the edge of the galaxy, far from any known routes. Not many ships traveled out there. Not many people would want to. But the message, it was not the usual cry for help. It was a strange one, urgent, yet oddly calm. The words were brief, almost cryptic. Urgent. Abandoned creature. Critical condition. Immediate assistance required. Life at risk. Eli leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping against the armrest. He'd heard stories about strange creatures in deep space, legends of alien life forms and abandoned projects. But nothing had ever interested him enough to investigate. He wasn't a hero. He was just a mechanic, a loner, who preferred the company of engines to people. But something gnawed at him, a feeling he couldn't shake. With a resigned sigh, Eli punched a few keys on the console, pulling up more details about the signal. His eyes narrowed. The message was coming from the planet known as Zykos 9, a lifeless world with no known inhabitants. Yet someone, or something, was in trouble. He stood up and grabbed his jacket. This wasn't a job he'd normally take on, but there was something about the message that seemed to call out to him. Something he couldn't explain. And besides, he had nothing better to do. All right, he muttered to himself. Let's see what's out there. As the engines roared to life, Eli steered the ship through the dark expanse of space, the stars streaking past him as he navigated toward Zykos 9. He had no idea what to expect. The thought of going to such a remote and dangerous place sent a slight shiver down his spine, but he quickly dismissed it. The trip wasn't supposed to take long. Just a quick rescue, in and out, no fuss. As he entered the planet's atmosphere, he marveled at how quiet the world appeared from orbit. The surface was a mix of rocky deserts and scorched landscapes, all devoid of any visible life. There was no sign of vegetation, no movement. It looked like a place where hope went to die. Eli's heart beat a little faster as his ship descended. The closer he got, the more he could feel the weight of the situation. His mind wandered to the creature mentioned in the distress signal. What kind of creature needed rescuing here, on such a forsaken planet? Was it an alien life form, or perhaps something else entirely? He landed the ship with practiced ease, setting it down in a small clearing among jagged rocks. The silence outside was deafening. For a moment, Eli stood in the cockpit, staring at the barren landscape, wondering if he was making a mistake. But the image of the message kept replaying in his mind. Creature, critical condition. Someone, or something, was in trouble. And that was enough for him. With a deep breath, he gathered his tools and stepped out of the ship. The harsh wind hit him immediately. It was hot, dry, and tasted faintly of ash. He wrapped his scarf tightly around his neck, adjusting the helmet on his head. The ground beneath him cracked as he took his first steps toward the planet's surface. The barren rocks seemed to stretch on forever, and the sun overhead was merciless. It didn't take long before he found signs of life, or rather, signs of something alive. A trail of broken rocks, disturbed dirt, and what looked like barnacles. His confusion deepened. He followed the trail, his boots crunching on the dry earth. And then he saw it. The baby dragon. It lay motionless under a large rock, its pale, almost translucent skin barely visible beneath the barnacles that covered its body. Eli froze for a moment, staring in disbelief. The creature was unlike anything he had ever seen before. Its wings were small and delicate, yet the barnacles weighed them down, rendering them useless. Its eyes were closed, but even in its unconscious state, there was an undeniable aura of strength around it. Eli crouched down beside the dragon, his heart pounding. The creature looked fragile, too fragile to survive in this environment. The soft wheeze of its breath told him just how close it was to death. He didn't know what to do at first. He had never dealt with something like this, but instinct kicked in. He gently reached out and touched the barnacles. They were hard, almost like a shell, but they were suffocating the creature. His hands worked quickly, removing the barnacles one by one, as carefully as he could. With each barnacle he removed, the dragon seemed to breathe a little easier. But Eli knew that time was running out. If he didn't get this creature off this planet soon, it would die here, forgotten like so many others. For the first time in a long while, Eli felt a sense of responsibility. This wasn't just a job, it was something more. And the mystery of how the dragon ended up here, abandoned by his creators, was just beginning. The journey begins. Eli stood beside the dragon, his heart pounding in his chest. The creature had been left for dead, its fragile form a silent testament to the carelessness of those who had abandoned it. He had never been one to get emotionally involved with anything, especially not strange alien creatures. But this dragon was different. It felt alive. Even in its weak state, there was something extraordinary about it, something that called out to him, urging him to do whatever it took to save it. The wind howled through the rocky terrain as Eli stood up, brushing the dirt off his hands. He had removed as many barnacles as he could, but there was still more to be done. He knew he couldn't stay here. The planet was inhospitable, a place where the dragon would never survive on its own. It needed shelter, food, and most importantly, medical attention. And that meant getting back to his ship, getting it off this forsaken planet, and into safer hands. He gently lifted the dragon, cradling its delicate body in his arms. The creature was surprisingly light, but it was also incredibly fragile, and Eli had to move slowly to avoid causing any further harm. The dragon's eyes fluttered open for a brief moment, its pupils dilated with confusion. It looked up at Eli, a spark of recognition in its gaze, as if it could sense that someone was trying to help. Then, with a soft sigh, it closed its eyes again, slipping back into unconsciousness. Eli's resolve hardened. He couldn't let this creature die here. He had to get it to safety. The journey back to the ship felt like it took forever. The path was treacherous, filled with jagged rocks and sharp inclines. But Eli's mind was focused on one thing: getting to his ship. He could hear the faint hum of the engines in the distance, a reminder that there was still hope. His ship had been his only companion for years, but now it felt like a lifeline. As he reached the base of a steep hill, the ground beneath his feet began to tremble. For a moment, he thought it was just his imagination, until a loud, low rumble echoed from somewhere above. Eli froze. His eyes narrowed, scanning the rocky cliffs around him. Something was wrong. From the corner of his eye, he saw movement, dark shapes darting across the landscape, figures cloaked in shadows. His heart skipped a beat. His first instinct was to run, but he couldn't leave the dragon behind. He glanced down at the creature, still unconscious in his arms. Time was running out. Eli had to act fast. He reached for his blaster, his fingers trembling. It wasn't a weapon he was accustomed to using, but he knew how to fire it. He wasn't a fighter by nature, but when it came to protecting something he cared about, he could be ruthless. The shapes were getting closer. The sound of footsteps echoed in the distance, drawing nearer. Whoever, or whatever, was out there, they weren't friendly. Eli's mind raced as he realized the danger he was in. He was not alone on this planet. The galactic aliens. The ones who had abandoned the dragon were likely coming back to reclaim it. They would stop at nothing to get the creature back. And if they found Eli, there was no telling what they would do. Eli took a deep breath and crouched low, holding the dragon as close to his chest as possible. He knew his only chance was to reach the ship before they could intercept him. He could already feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him, the gravity of what he was up against. The sound of movement grew louder, closer still. He couldn't wait any longer. He turned and bolted, running with everything he had. The wind rushed past him as his boots pounded against the rocky ground. His heart raced, and his breath came in short gasps, but he couldn't afford to stop. Not now. He could see the outline of the ship up ahead, its engines glowing faintly against the dark sky. But the figures were gaining on him. They were fast. Too fast. Eli's mind raced as he reached the ship, his hands shaking as he punched in the code to open the hatch. The door slid open, and he hurried inside, cradling the dragon in his arms. As soon as the hatch sealed behind him, he ran to the cockpit, activating the ship's systems. But the moment he glanced over his shoulder, his stomach dropped. The galactic aliens were right behind him, their figures silhouetted against the dust and rocks. They had followed him here. Eli's pulse quickened as he slammed his hands onto the control panel, igniting the ship's engines. The ship lurched upward, and he pulled back on the throttle, sending the vessel soaring into the air. Through the viewport, he saw the alien ships rising from the planet's surface, their dark silhouettes chasing after him, faster and more agile than his own ship. The chase had begun. As the ship broke through the atmosphere and into the cold void of space, Eli glanced at the baby dragon lying motionless in his seat. It was still alive, but barely. Time was running out. The stars stretched out before him, vast and endless. Eli's hands tightened on the controls. The chase was only just beginning, and he had no idea what he was about to face. The abandoned planet. The ship cut through the cold, vast expanse of space, its engines roaring with power as Eli guided it through the stars. The weight of what had just happened still hung heavily in the air. He could feel the presence of the galactic aliens closing in behind him, their ships persistent in their pursuit. The tension inside the cockpit was palpable, the only sound the rhythmic hum of the ship's engines and the occasional beeping of the control systems. Eli's gaze flickered toward the unconscious baby dragon, resting on the seat beside him. The dragon's pale, almost ethereal form seemed so fragile, like a ghost. Despite the barnacles he had painstakingly removed, the creature still looked battered and weak. Eli's heart clenched at the thought that he might not be able to save it in time. He had to get to safety. He had to get off this dangerous path and find a way to heal the dragon properly. The chase had already taken them far from the barren planet of Psychos 9. As Eli glanced at the star map, he realized he was on the edge of an unexplored region of space, an area known for its dark energy fields and uncharted anomalies. It was a place no one dared to go, where space-time itself twisted and turned, sometimes distorting even the most advanced ships. And yet, something in Eli told him that this could be his only chance. It was risky, but if he could lose the galactic aliens in this region, he might finally get the time he needed to treat the dragon and figure out why it was abandoned in the first place. Eli set a course for the anomaly, a rift in space that had long been avoided by travelers. His hands tightened around the controls as the ship accelerated toward the unknown. Behind him, the alien ships remained hot on his tail. Their pursuit was relentless, like predators closing in on their prey. But Eli wasn't afraid, not anymore. He had a purpose now. He wasn't just running for himself. He was running for the dragon, a creature that, against all odds, had found its way to him. As the ship entered the anomaly's influence, the lights inside the cockpit flickered. A strange hum filled the air, vibrating through the metal walls. The stars outside began to warp, bending and twisting in impossible ways. The space around them seemed to distort, warping as if reality itself was being pulled in every direction. Eli's stomach lurched, and the ship shook violently, as though caught in a violent storm. It was working. The galactic alien ships hesitated, the distortion of space throwing off their sensors. Eli's heart raced. He couldn't afford to let up now. Come on, come on, Eli muttered to himself, willing the ship forward. The dragon stirred beside him, its breathing shallow, and for a split second, Eli thought he saw its pale eyes open. Just a crack. The dragon's gaze met his, and for a fleeting moment, there was a connection. It was as if the dragon understood that Eli was doing everything in his power to protect it. The ship jolted again, this time even more violently. The view screen displayed strange, swirling patterns, ripples in space-time that stretched across the void. The alien ships were no longer directly behind them, but Eli knew they were still there, lurking just out of sight. He couldn't shake the feeling that they would find a way to follow him, no matter how far he went. The ship lurched forward again, and Eli's fingers flew over the control panel, trying to stabilize the craft as they entered the heart of the anomaly. The strange energy fields hummed louder, and for a moment, Eli was struck by a sudden, chilling silence. It was as if the whole universe had gone still. Then, without warning, the ship broke through the rift. Space stretched out before him, vast and infinite. But what he saw ahead was nothing like what he had imagined. A strange, shimmering structure loomed on the horizon. An ancient, long-forgotten space station. It seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, glowing with strange lights that flickered in and out of existence. The walls of the station were covered in alien runes, their meaning unknown. Eli's eyes widened in shock. He had never seen anything like it. The station wasn't on any star maps. It wasn't even in the records of the Galactic Council. How could it have existed all this time without anyone knowing? He was about to turn the ship toward it when the warning lights on the dashboard began to flash. His heart skipped a beat. The galactic aliens were back. They had entered the rift. Their ships were following him, undeterred by the strange anomalies in space. The rift might have thrown them off temporarily, but it had also led them right to this unknown station. They were closing in fast. Eli knew he didn't have much time. The alien ships were faster, better equipped, and far more experienced than he was. But this station, whatever it was, might hold the key to saving the dragon, and it could be the only place where he could finally confront the aliens and stop their pursuit. "Let's hope this place has more to offer than I think," Eli muttered, punching in the coordinates for the station's docking bay. As the ship slowly approached the glowing structure, the once familiar stars faded from view. Everything seemed to bend and pulse with energy, as though the entire area was alive, vibrating with a force beyond comprehension. Eli's mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The ship passed through an opening in the station's outer shell, and Eli barely had time to react before the ship was engulfed by a strange force field that pulled them inward, guiding the ship toward an airlock. He took one last look at the view screen before the hatch sealed behind them. The alien ships were still coming, their dark shapes looming in the distance. But as the ship was pulled deeper into the station, Eli felt a flicker of hope. The station was his last chance. It was his only hope of saving the dragon and uncovering the truth about what had happened to it. But the mysteries of this place went deeper than Eli could imagine. The station wasn't just a relic of the past. It was something far more powerful, something that might change everything. And with the galactic aliens still on their tail, Eli had no idea what he was about to unleash. Unexpected bonding. The ship's airlock hissed as it opened, and Eli stepped cautiously out, keeping a firm grip on the unconscious dragon, which was now wrapped in a soft makeshift blanket. The strange, pulsating light of the station bathed them both in an eerie glow. The air inside the station smelled sterile, almost mechanical, with a faint hum that reverberated through the walls, vibrating through Eli's bones. The station was vast. Endless hallways of smooth, metallic surfaces stretched in every direction, their design unfamiliar and alien. Everywhere Eli looked, there were strange symbols etched into the walls, symbols that made his head ache just by looking at them. He knew they had to be important, but he couldn't decipher them. It was as if the very walls were speaking to him, telling him secrets that his mind couldn't understand. The dragon stirred in his arms, letting out a soft groan. Its eyes opened, just a sliver, glinting with that same pale light, though weaker now. Eli stopped walking for a moment, his gaze softening as he looked down at the creature. It had come from somewhere far beyond the reach of ordinary space, and it had suffered. The barnacles, still embedded in its skin, had caused it so much pain. It was only now that Eli realized how deeply connected he felt to the dragon. Perhaps it was the fact that it had been abandoned, left to die alone in a forgotten corner of the galaxy. Or maybe it was the bond that had begun to form between them since he first touched its fragile form. "Hang in there," Eli whispered, more to himself than to the dragon. He needed answers. He needed to find a way to heal it and figure out why the galactic aliens had abandoned it in the first place. Suddenly, a sound broke the silence, a soft, mechanical whir. Eli turned, his hand instinctively reaching for his blaster, but he stopped himself just in time. It was a robotic figure, gliding effortlessly across the floor toward him. Its shape was humanoid, but its face was a smooth, featureless mask. It seemed to be watching Eli with an intelligence far beyond any droid he had ever encountered. The robot's voice, metallic and emotionless, echoed through the hallway. "You have brought an outsider to the station. The protocol is clear. All unknown life forms must be assessed and contained." Eli's eyes narrowed. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I need help. This creature is." "The creature is of no importance," the robot interrupted, its tone flat. "Its fate is irrelevant. You will be taken to the central hub for processing." Eli's pulse quickened. "What are you talking about? I'm not here for processing. I'm here to save this dragon, and I need answers." The robot paused, and for a moment, Eli thought it might respond. But instead, it turned and began to glide down the hallway. "Follow," it commanded. Eli hesitated, looking down at the dragon. He didn't know who or what had built this station, but something told him he couldn't trust them. Yet he had no choice. The galactic aliens were still coming for him, and if he wanted to keep the dragon alive, he needed whatever resources this station could provide. "All right," Eli muttered, shifting the dragon in his arms. "Lead the way." The hallway opened into a massive chamber, its walls lined with intricate alien technology. Floating platforms hovered in midair, carrying various devices and tools. A strange glow filled the space, casting sharp shadows on the walls. In the center of the room stood a large, circular dais, its surface covered in a shifting pattern of glowing runes. Eli's breath caught in his throat as he approached. The dais seemed to hum with an energy that made the air crackle with static. As they entered, the robot stepped aside and turned toward Eli. "Place the creature on the dais. It will be healed." Eli's eyes darted from the robot to the dragon. "Healed? How can you?" "Place it on the dais," the robot repeated, its voice unwavering. Eli hesitated but reluctantly placed the baby dragon onto the dais. The moment its body made contact with the surface, a strange wave of energy rippled through the room. The runes on the dais flickered, and the air seemed to grow heavier, charged with an almost tangible power. The baby dragon twitched, its body shuddering as if responding to the energy. Eli stepped back, his eyes wide. He could feel the power emanating from the dais. It was unlike anything he had ever encountered. An ancient, almost otherworldly force that seemed to bend space around it. For a long moment, nothing happened. Eli stood frozen, watching the dragon, hoping for a miracle. The galactic aliens could be here any moment. He couldn't afford to wait. But then, a faint light began to glow beneath the dragon's scales. Slowly, the barnacles that had been so firmly attached to its skin began to dissolve, as if they were being pulled apart by invisible threads. Eli's heart raced as he watched the dragon's body slowly heal. Its wings, once weighed down with barnacles, began to unfurl, stretching out with a grace that seemed impossible for such a small creature. The dragon's breathing deepened, becoming steadier, as if it was drawing in the energy from the days itself. It was working. The dragon was healing. Eli watched, awestruck. He had never seen anything like this. The energy in the room seemed to respond to the dragon's presence, as though the creature was unlocking something hidden deep within the station. Slowly, the dragon opened its eyes, blinking in the dim light. It turned its head toward Eli, its gaze meeting his once more. And this time, the look in its eyes was different. It was filled with recognition, gratitude. Eli's chest tightened as the dragon made a small, almost imperceptible movement, a tiny flicker of a smile on its lips. He didn't understand how it was possible, but in that moment, he felt an unspoken connection between them, something that transcended words, something that bound them together. The dragon was no longer just a creature he had rescued. It was a companion, a friend. As Eli watched the baby dragon, a new resolve formed in his heart. This wasn't just a rescue mission anymore. There were answers to be found here, answers about the galactic aliens, about the dragon's origins, and about this mysterious station. And no matter what, Eli was going to get to the truth. The rescue and revelation. The dragon lay still on the dais, its body now fully healed, the last traces of barnacles dissolving into the ether. Eli stood at the edge of the chamber, his heart still racing from the surreal scene he had just witnessed. The energy of the days seemed to hum through the air, its power lingering as if the station itself was alive, watching them. The baby dragon's breathing had steadied, its wings stretched fully now, the once delicate appendages now strong and whole. It was no longer the weak creature he had found on the barren planet. It was something much more. Eli's eyes never left the dragon, his mind whirling with the possibilities. He couldn't shake the feeling that the station wasn't just a relic. It was a nexus, a place of incredible importance. But what kind of power could heal something like this? What was this station truly capable of? As if on cue, the doors to the chamber slid open with a soft hiss, and a group of figures entered, their footsteps echoing through the cold, silent room. Eli froze, instinctively reaching for the blaster at his hip. But the baby dragon's eyes flared open, its attention shifting toward the newcomers. For a moment, time seemed to stretch, and Eli realized the figures weren't human. They were the galactic aliens. Their dark, armored forms moved with precise synchronization as they approached. Their helmets, reflective and featureless, gave no indication of emotion, but their posture, rigid, purposeful, made their intentions clear. They were here for the dragon. Eli's pulse quickened. They had tracked him all the way through the anomaly and into the heart of this strange station. The odds had been stacked against him, but now, with the dragon healed and stronger than ever, Eli knew he couldn't back down. Not now. Not when the stakes were so high. One of the aliens stepped forward, its voice cold and mechanical as it spoke. "The creature is ours. Return it to us, human, and we will spare your life." Eli's grip tightened on the blaster, but the dragon stirred beside him. It lifted its head, its pale eyes locking onto the alien, and a low growl rumbled in its throat. The energy in the room seemed to shift, the power of the days still pulsing through the dragon's body, strengthening it with every beat of its heart. "You abandoned it," Eli snapped, stepping in front of the dragon. "You left it to die on Zycos 9. It's mine to protect now." The alien leader tilted its head, as if considering Eli's words. "You do not understand, human. This creature was never meant to live. It is an experiment, a tool, a weapon, created for a purpose beyond your comprehension." Eli's mind raced. An experiment, a weapon? The dragon was far more than that, more than a tool to be discarded once it had outlived its usefulness. The truth of it was slowly beginning to unravel, but Eli needed to know more. He needed answers. Before he could speak, the dragon let out a piercing cry, a sound that filled the chamber with an intensity that shook the walls. The aliens flinched, clearly unsettled, But the dragon's eyes were locked on them with an unspoken challenge. It was ready to fight, to defend itself. "No," Eli said firmly, stepping between the dragon and the aliens. "I won't let you take it. You've done enough damage." The alien leader's eyes flickered with annoyance, and it raised its hand, signaling to its comrades. "You are making a grave mistake, human. You will regret this." In that instant, the dragon's wings unfurled with a sharp crack, its body glowing with an ethereal energy. The day's influence was still strong within it, and the power that had healed it now surged through its veins, turning it into something more than just a wounded creature. It was a force of nature. The alien leader raised a weapon, but before it could fire, the dragon lunged forward with a speed that Eli had not expected. Its small but powerful body collided with the alien, sending the creature flying backward. The sound of metal crashing against metal echoed through the room. Eli watched in awe as the dragon's newfound strength came to life. It was a blur of motion, its wings slicing through the air as it moved with unmatched precision. The alien soldiers attempted to regroup, but the dragon was relentless, its movements swift and calculated, each strike carrying the force of a storm. Eli took a step back, realizing the sheer scale of what was happening. The dragon was not just fighting for survival. It was fighting for freedom, for its right to exist. And in that moment, Eli knew that they weren't just running from the galactic aliens. They were facing them head-on. The battle raged on, the sound of combat filling the station's walls. Eli couldn't just stand there. He needed to help. With a swift motion, he reached for his blaster, firing at the alien soldiers who were closing in on the dragon. His shots were precise, taking down one of the alien soldiers with a direct hit to the chest. "Go," Eli shouted at the dragon. "We need to leave now." The dragon looked at him, its eyes flashing with recognition. It understood. With one final powerful roar, the dragon launched itself into the air, sending the remaining aliens scattering in all directions. The sound of its wings filled the chamber as it flew toward the exit, its movements graceful yet fierce. Eli ran after it, his heart racing. The alien leader, now visibly in rage, shouted orders to the remaining soldiers, but it was too late. The dragon had already soared past them, escaping into the depths of the station. Eli followed, determined to protect the dragon no matter what. As he raced down the corridor, he glanced over his shoulder. The galactic aliens were not far behind, but they couldn't keep up with the dragon. It was faster, stronger, and fueled by something greater than mere survival. They burst through a set of massive doors, emerging into the open space beyond the station. The stars stretched out before them, and Eli saw the ship waiting in the distance, the one he had arrived in. Their only chance to escape. The dragon circled above, waiting for him, its wings cutting through the vacuum of space. Eli didn't hesitate. He ran toward the ship, climbing aboard, his eyes fixed on the dragon. With a final burst of energy, the creature dove toward the ship, landing gracefully on the deck. Eli quickly activated the ship's thrusters, and they blasted off, leaving the station behind. The galactic aliens were still in pursuit, but Eli knew they had a fighting chance. They were no longer running. They were escaping. And as the stars outside the viewport began to blur, Eli's mind raced with one question. What had he just uncovered? What was the true purpose of the dragon? And why had the galactic aliens gone to such lengths to destroy it? The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, Eli felt a sense of purpose. He wasn't just protecting a creature. He was uncovering a mystery that could change everything. And the truth was waiting to be revealed. Victory and new beginnings. The roar of the ship's engines was deafening as they surged into the cold, vast expanse of space, leaving the station and the galactic aliens behind. Eli's hands were still gripping the control panel, his knuckles white from the tension. The baby dragon, now perched beside him in the cockpit, stared out the viewport, its pale eyes reflecting the starlight. The dragon had grown in more ways than one during their brief escape, It was no longer the weak, abandoned creature he had found on Psychos 9. It was now a fierce, powerful being, a force that seemed to resonate with the very stars themselves. Eli glanced at the dragon, his heart pounding in his chest. The creature had saved them, fought beside him, and shown him the kind of strength he never thought possible from something so small. There was no doubt about it now. This wasn't just a rescue mission anymore. It had become a partnership. Its ship was now in the clear, the alien ships lost in the void behind them, unable to catch up in the vastness of space. Eli exhaled deeply, the tension in his muscles finally beginning to ease as he turned toward the dragon. It seemed to sense his relief, and with a quiet chirp, it nudged its head against his arm, a gesture of companionship. Eli smiled. In that moment, he realized just how much they had come to rely on each other. But as the stars stretched out before them, Eli knew their journey was far from over. The galactic aliens had made it clear that the dragon was not just a helpless creature. It was a weapon, an experiment, something more than it appeared. And Eli had learned that the dragon's healing power was only the tip of the iceberg. Whatever this creature was, its importance reached far beyond his understanding. "All right, little one," Eli muttered, glancing at the dragon. "We've got a long road ahead of us." But the dragon made no sound. Its attention was drawn to the holographic display that flickered to life in front of them. Eli frowned, his eyes narrowing at the new message that appeared on the screen. A distress signal. Not just any distress signal. This one was encoded, a hidden message that seemed to be targeting their ship directly. It was a faint transmission, but it carried with it a tone of urgency, the kind that immediately drew Eli's attention. He quickly decrypted the signal, his fingers flying across the console as the words began to take shape. "We have the answers you seek, but you must come to us. Time is running out." Eli's heart skipped a beat. Was this a trap, or was it an opportunity? He leaned back in his seat, staring at the message for a long moment. The encrypted signal was obviously meant for him. But who had sent it? And why was the dragon so important that it had triggered this mysterious transmission? "Looks like we got company," Eli muttered under his breath. The dragon turned its head slowly, its pale eyes locking with his. There was something unspoken in that gaze, a shared understanding. The dragon was no longer just a victim of circumstance. It was part of something much bigger, something that even Eli wasn't fully aware of yet. The creature had an ancient power, and the more he learned, the more he realized that they were only scratching the surface. The message had come from an uncharted region of space, a place even the galactic aliens hadn't ventured. It was a far-off system, deep within the galaxy's most dangerous sectors, known for its strange anomalies and unexplained phenomena. A place where no one dared to travel. But for some reason, someone wanted Eli to go there. Someone who knew more than they were letting on. Eli glanced at the dragon again, his mind racing with possibilities. The journey ahead would be fraught with danger, but this was no longer about running away from the galactic aliens. It was about uncovering the truth, about finding out why the dragon had been created, why it had been abandoned, and what role it was meant to play in the greater conflict that was brewing. The ship's navigation systems lit up as Eli punched in the coordinates for the mysterious system. He wasn't sure what awaited them, but he knew one thing. This was no longer a simple rescue mission. This was the beginning of something far bigger, something that could change everything. As the ship surged toward the unknown, Eli felt a sense of anticipation building within him. The future was uncertain, but the dragon's presence beside him gave him a strange sense of comfort. They were in this together, and no matter what the next challenge would be, they would face it side by side. The stars outside the cockpit seemed to shift as the ship entered warp speed, the fabric of space bending around them. Eli's heart raced, knowing that with each passing second, they were closer to the answers they both sought. But deep within his mind, Eli couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they weren't just running from something. They were running towards something. And what awaited them at the end of this journey could change the course of history itself. The future was uncertain, yes, but it was also full of possibility. And together, Eli and the dragon were ready to face whatever came next.